Hello, everybody. Welcome to the October session of the webinar series. Thank you for joining us today. Today we're going to be talking about AI and appeal rating, what it can do, what it can't, and what is coming next, because a lot is coming. So ADAM is the Association for Healthcare Denial and Appeal Management. I'm sure many of you already know that. We are the nation's only association dedicated to healthcare denial and appeal management. We really are here to support you, professionals working in the field of health insurance and appeal management, through collaborating and educating you guys, and also taking your ideas and putting them to fruition. We are generously supported by the organization PayerWatch. They are a partner. If you feel you want to, give them a look, go to their website. Their website has a lot of great resources, just like Adam. So feel free to take some time to do that. So we have CEUs offered today. Free CEUs are offered only to ADAM members. So if you are here and you're not an ADAM member and you want a CEU, please make sure you register ASAP. To obtain CEUs, you must be an ADAM member. You have to attend this webinar for at least 53 minutes. Today it might be a little bit shorter, so we're actually going to say it's going to be 90% of the webinar. And then you have to complete the survey that's going to pop up automatically for you at the end of the webinar. CEU certificates will be emailed to you within a week of the webinar. You can't get them just for watching it live after the fact. All of them are going to come from info@adam.org or adaminfo@adam.org. And if you do not receive the CEU, please send an email ASAP to me.
So CE needs to be read verbatim as applies to for physicians. The title of today's talk, AI and Appeal Writing 2025, what it can do, what it can't do, what's coming next. Today's date is actually not 2024. I am alert oriented to person, place, date, and time. It is 2025. Joint accreditation statement appears there. And Medco LLC designates this live activity for a maximum of 1 hour of AMA RPA Category 1 credits for physicians.
Sorry about that. It's coming up.
Okay, clearly AI does not like what I'm about to say. So the objectives here, after attending this program, you should be able to identify core AI and LLM concepts, select tasks that require human judgment versus those that AI can safely assist with at this time, recognize the essential elements of a provider-side AI governance committee, amongst other things. Next slide. So closure of conflict interest. With respect to the people preparing and presenting today, there were no known commercial interest conflicts that would influence the subject matter being discussed. Directions on how to get your certificate are available at adam.cmecertificateonline.com. And print, download, and save your certificate for your records. If you lose your certificate or need help, wow, AI is really having a day here, folks. Disclaimer, the Association for Healthcare Denial and Appeal Management publishes and distributes materials on its website that are created by our members or invited industry subject matter experts for the benefit of all ADAM members. ADAM does not certify the accuracy or authority of these materials. These materials are distributed and presented as research information to be used by ADAM members in conjunction with other research deemed necessary in the exercise of ADAM members' independent professional judgment. ADAM claims no liability in relation to reliance on the content of these materials. The views expressed in the materials are the views of the materials authors, myself, and do not necessarily represent the views of ADAM as an organization. Any references are provided for informational purposes only and do not constitute endorsement of any source or product. There are no conflicts of interest to declare for any individual in a position to control the content of this presentation, i.e. myself, forced to read that with a gun to my head by our attorneys, as they will always have you do at the beginning of such a webinar. Learning outcomes as it relates to nurses, essentially the same as physicians. Identify core artificial intelligence and LLM concepts. Select tasks that humans can do versus things that AI can assist with at this time. Recognize what an AI governance committee can and should do. and then talk about some success metrics as we incorporate AI into appeal workflows going forward. Next slide. Myself, if you're here, you probably heard me speak before. My background is as a hospitalist, originally at Cleveland Clinic, where I started the section of hospital medicine in Florida. 25-year background in healthcare denials, audits, appeals, care management. I'm the CEO of, Chief Medical Officer at PayerWatch, and a board member at ADAM, as well as a member of the American College of Physician Advisors, where I serve on the Government Affairs Committee. Next slide, if you would. Okay, we've gone through this, so we're going to skip ahead into the meat of the matter here and talk about why this matters now with the next slide. Why this matters now, it's striking, I think, over the last 24 months, the volume of denials that are becoming, started as a trickle and becoming a tidal wave. Revenue cycle times have gotten compressed. There is a push from leadership to get responses to audits and denials out quicker, to get money back in the door faster. What we're seeing, what I am seeing, and I'm assuming that the folks listening today are seeing, are denials from insurers that have all of the thumbprints of being authored by AI. We're going to look at some lawsuits in the midst of this that really do pull the curtain back on how AI is used by insurers. And I think one of the things, as we as a community, as ADAM, folks in the back end of the revenue cycle dealing with denials, audits, and appeals, are starting to realize is that AI can support speed and consistency when it is well controlled and well governed. It can also run completely amok and go crazy if a hands-off approach is taken to it. At the end of the day, human judgment, clinician in the loop, and final sign-off remain essential. I have always taken a position, and I am always going to take the position that clinical judgment, a clinician in the loop, is going to always be required for AI-assisted appeals. Just as you wouldn't get on a jet airplane today in today's day and age capable of taking off and landing by itself without a pilot, you'd expect a pilot at the wheels to monitor the systems and the flight en route and make sure that you arrive safely. And nothing has changed when we now let AI and computers start to work in this arena. So as we go to the next slide, we'll talk about what AIs and LLMs are. In plain English. Essentially, what these do, LLMs, large language models, break text down into individual tokens. An individual token may not necessarily constitute an entire word. It may be a fraction of a word. It may be a fraction of different words combined together, or it may be an individual word. These are not databases. This is not Google with the entirety of the internet at its disposal. This is not a source of truth system. These are synthetic systems. They piece data together and predict the next token given a series of tokens that come before it. It's a probability system. Retrieval brings facts and generation composes text. There's a schematic at the bottom that shows how an LLM works. So if it starts with the sentence, "the sky is," it assigns a predictive value to each of those words. And based on the likeliness of that word, it picks the most accurate word that it thinks will complete the sentence. In this case, "the sky is blue" was felt to be, in the basis of this LLM, the most likely candidate to complete that sentence, and it chooses blue to complete it. So you can see at some level, despite people talking about these systems being capable of thinking, creativity, and all these other human emotions that we impart onto them, at least for the use cases that are open and available right now, this is what happens when you pull the curtain back and look at them. They're not magic. It's brute force. It's machine learning. It's machine operative. It's based on predictions. It's not based on original thought processes at this point. We may get to that point, but as we exist right now, and the use cases we're going to talk about today, not so much. And that schematic at the bottom does a great job of describing how most of these programs work. As we go into the key terms, these are the key terms you need to understand to know really everything you need to know about quote AI end quote. We talked about tokens. Tokens being a word chunk, can be 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 letters. It depends on how the program slices and dices things. And the context window is how much input the specific model can handle at once. Modern versions, current versions of ChatGPT, for example, ChatGPT can literally handle hundreds of thousands of these chunks at a time, and the amount of information that these things are capable of handling is going up exponentially. Interestingly, this is coming at a cost. These systems use enormous amounts of electricity and are really, we have a number of companies that are actually building their own power centers, including nuclear reactors, to start to power some of these LLMs. That's how power hungry they are and how much energy is required to drive these. Retrieval grounding means pulling real facts back to back outputs. So we'll talk about hallucinations, we'll talk about some other things, but retrieval grounding is just like it sounds like, pulling back real facts to back an output. And citations are footnotes, essentially, to show transparency where the information was obtained from. Human in the loop, I talked about earlier in this talk, and I think this is critical to the work that we do in this area. You need someone to look at the output and say, does this make sense? Even if you tell a LLM or an AI not to hallucinate, and we'll talk about what a hallucination is, but basically not to BS you, not to make things up or get creative or distract from the truth, that directive does not guarantee a factual and true output. So you need someone to say, to read an appeal and say, does this line up with the facts at hand? Is what this letter stating actually what happened? The idea of an audit trail and version awareness, absolutely essential for accountability, so that we know what system was being used. And if we start to see changes and errors and things cropping up, we can go back and we can look at that particular version of the LLM and start to look at improvements that may be needed there. If you want to go to the next slide, we'll start to talk about things like hallucinations. And a lot of these you'll see are words that mimic human behavior. Hallucinations are just what they sound like, unsupported assertions. You can get around those by telling the LLM to support every sentence with facts from the record or show you how it's being considered. I have caught LLMs, even with those directives, telling me convincing stories that when I went back and fact checked what they claimed to be the source of that information, found out that the fact check was actually too perfect and the source information had been made up. The idea of lost in the middle, LLMs are measurably less reliable when key evidence sits mid-document. Think of sending an elderly parent or grandparent with some mild degree of cognitive impairment into Safeway with a 2-page grocery list. They might remember what was at the beginning of the list, they remember what's at the end of the list, but quite often if the list is too long, they're going to get confused or muddled with what was needed in the middle, and they're going to get lost there. We can see things called citation drift and vague sourcing, which is just what we alluded to under hallucinations, where the citations being cited may not actually say what they're suggested as being said. There is a tendency for overconfidence. These are very good because the wording, the way that these outputs are generated is so well and exquisitely written and argued that unless you have a good sixth sense about what you're being told, and this is why it's especially important for clinicians to really look at these with some degree of skepticism. You can have degrees of overconfidence. You can believe what you're being told just due to the polished wording. So if we go to the next slide, we'll talk about appropriate uses of clinical AI or AI in clinical denial appeals. So what AI can do in appeals at this point, from the standpoint of folks in our audience who are working, handling responses to denials, audits, and appeals. They can identify denial themes. They can focus on areas of policy. So for example, if you were to feed it a provider policy related to total knee arthroplasty and ask it to summarize medical necessity, do a great job of summarizing that because it's got an original document to focus on. It saves you from reading through a 20-page document, brings you back to 6 bullet points defining medical necessity for that procedure. Where you've got large amounts of sometimes repetitive data that I personally struggle in writing longer appeals with, proves to be really well suited to organizing relevant excerpts to get reviewer attention. And what I found these to be very useful in is developing a well thought out, organized letter from beginning to end that I can go back and edit. And truth be told, the final quality of that output is generally much better. And the logic that flows through the story that the LLM's telling with clinician editing is generally on a par and oftentimes better than I would do individually. Quality prompts on timeliness and completeness, so keeps everybody on track. Okay, you want to go to the next? What AI cannot do in appeals, and this is why we need clinicians in this. At the end of the day, AI is going to be a tool in your arsenal to allow you to get more done in a day as more and more denials are coming across your desk. AI is incapable of rendering medical necessity or replacing clinician reasoning as it exists today. There is some suggestion down the road that may change, but for the sake of what we're talking about in this moment of time, suffice it to say that it's incapable of accurately rendering and defining medical necessity. It can't, on its own accord, in most use cases, satisfy plan timelines or compliance duties on its own. So that requires human input. And then finally, since these things have to go out and be signed by a human, they can't serve as the final author of the appeal. All of our appeals at PayerWatch go out with my signature on. They're all read. And I would be loath to send out a AI generated appeal, sign my name to it in any circumstance, and not read or edit what was there. You want to go on to the next slide? So where AI fits in appeal work. Ideally, inputs to it would include things like denial language, plan terms or policies, and then the relevant portions of the record. When you're feeding information into an LLM, as we said, you want to avoid giving it too much information and having it get lost. And under HIPAA, you just want to give it the minimum amount of information that's necessary to complete the task. AI can assist wholeheartedly with organizing your evidence, drafting a text, drafting a timeline. Clinicians are still responsible for not finalizing the argument. Output should include evidence-linked text, for example, referring to Bates page numbers in a medical record, as well as a clear review trail showing how it got to the conclusion it did, how it made the assertions it did. So those things can be fact-checked by the reviewer. The advantages of AI workflow automation in terms of denials, audits, appeals primarily relate to increased productivity and efficiency, a phenomenal ability to look at vast amounts of data in a short period of time and start to notice trends that humans might not be able to pick up on. And with that comes cost savings, and hopefully from the revenue cycle standpoint, overturns are happening in a quicker fashion and money is coming back into the institution faster than it otherwise would. So as we talk about safe use principles, I did mention HIPAA earlier, and there's a minimum requirement under HIPAA 2 that tells us to limit the medical record in any circumstance to the minimum amount of information necessary to accomplish the task. So safe use principles are going to be feeding the LLM the appropriate record. You might want to just feed it the progress notes, the history and physical, or a discharge summary. You may not want to feed it all the entirety of the record, patient accounting notes, finance notes, etc., because it's going to do two things. It's going to probably overwhelm the system, and it's going to increase the risk of an inappropriate or non-factual output. Always insisting on evidence-linked drafting. So as an appeal is being written, as you're working with an LLM to help you draft a response to an audit or an appeal, make sure that it's citing where it's getting the information from. I mentioned Bates page numbers, which are how cases are numbered legally, with a generally top right of the page, sequentially from page 1 through the end of the record, but have it cite the Bates number where in the record that it found that information. You want to have complete auditability of sources and reviewers, and ultimately a human in the loop for all clinical conclusions. Lesson to me that I learned last year when I was starting to play with LLMs and looking at their ability to independently write appeals was I asked a HIPAA compliant version of chat to complete a SOFA score, to calculate a SOFA score on a patient's record. Same set of vitals, same medical record I gave. The record was about 120 pages. I asked it 5 times, and interestingly, it calculated 4 different SOFA scores. So that, as I said, it really speaks to the need to have a experienced clinician look at the output, say, is this correct, and have a human in the loop for all clinical conclusions. Data handling and privacy are really, really significant issues here. Most of these LLMs have direct access to the internet. So you need to make sure, and if you're working in a hospital environment, that the LLM or AI that you're using is HIPAA compliant. If you're uploading a medical record to chat or to Grok or to Claude, those things are going out to the cloud, and you've immediately created a data breach. So it's imperative that the hospital or your employer be involved in whatever use case you're considering for AI to limit the potential for a PHI exposure and a breach. Role-based access. So you may have someone in finance who's just looking at financial data. You may have a nurse reviewer that's looking at clinical data. And it's important to have internal visibility of edits and approvals to the document. So when you're working, for example, in Word, you can do track changes where you can see who came in and changed what. And those sorts of ideas that we already use in a day-to-day environment on editing and tracking changes through Adobe or Word are important here to know who did what and where the LLM weighed in. Storage and retention of all records created with this have to align with the organizational policy. So I think the takeaway from this is not something that you want to embark on by yourself. In all likelihood, your system has an AI governance committee that will be engaged in this, know all of these things, and you would be working with to get these things moving forward. If you want to go over to the next slide. So as we talk about provider side AI governance, these are some of the things that these AI governance committees are looking at. A clear charter and scope for AI use and appeals is paramount. And hospitals are looking at AI in the setting of summarizing patient notes, natural language processing to transcribe physician or provider patient encounters. But as we talk about AI use and appeals, a clear set of guardrails about how it's going to be used and not be used. When we talk about red teaming is a concept where you get a group of people that really come together and are doing nothing more than trying to find fault with and poke holes in a solution. And that's imperative, because you want to check your whatever LLM that you're using, to check not only the quality of its response, but its bias. If I were, for example, to bring somebody up to New England this time of year where I am and showed them trees, they'd see everything was red and green and lots of trees on the ground. If I then said, and they'd never been anywhere else, I said, well, describe a palm tree to me. There's no palm trees up here. They couldn't describe a palm tree. So they have a bias towards trees that they're seeing in New England, and they can't imagine trees in any other part of the world or any other form than what they're seeing up here. And those sorts of biases can get ingrained in LLM models. Model and version logging for transparency over time, incredibly important. Every time a change is made to a LLM, it's, for lack of a better word, it's thinking how it's approaching its problem solving changes, and the output starts to change. So as it worked with Chat GPT from version 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 now, I've got a couple of standard documents that I've run through it each time with the same prompt. And every time there's been a significant update or upgrade to Chat GPT, that prompt and that standard set of documents generates a different output. And so it becomes imperative to know what model and version you're using to have transparency in what you're doing over time and to monitor the output. Incident response path to correct defects. So if you're continually seeing a model, for example, as I mentioned earlier on, that couldn't calculate a SOFA score, that's something that needs to be looked at and run down and find out what's going on. Is it a prompt? Is it something in the way the LLM's configured? Is it something in the way that our medical records are being processed? And again, I keep harping on this over and over. Clinician in the loop, human review requirement for clinical content. Going on to the next slide, we'll start to talk about Medicare Advantage guardrails and some litigation that's around this. So under Medicare Advantage, determinations must be individualized and aligned to traditional CMS standards. Algorithms may assist, but they can't replace patient-specific review. There is expected to be a member-level rationale, which is supported by the record. And my best practice when I'm looking at a denial from an MA plan is to, in the response, demand to know if AI was involved in any part of this denial, and if so, what version and to what extent. I've yet to have a insurer come back and admit it, but at least I'm putting it in the record. If you could go on to the next slide. There's a lot of litigation, as you might imagine. Insurance companies have been quick to ramp this up. Hospitals have been much more cautious and judicious in the response. There was a class action involving a Cigna program called PXDX, which alleged high volume claim denials using a AI process with minimalized individualized review. As I recall it, a medical director admitted to signing off on several thousand denials with a single click of the mouse and not reviewing them. We're seeing standard boilerplate language, template-like outcomes coming back over and over again. The insurers, as you would expect, are contesting these allegations, and some of these are in various stages of litigation, and I suspect by the time we get through discovery and trial, it'll be a couple more years. At the end of the day, the best practice is to request the claim file and the specific basis for the determination that was made, including the evidence that was relied upon. You may not get everything you're hoping for. Sometimes you may get more than you think. Next slide. So this case was in Minnesota. It involved a United Health Medicare Advantage beneficiary who died. And as a state brought forth litigation, that alleged that the use of automated tools in post-acute determinations under MA was illegal. The public filings described claims talking about early terminations of post-acute care and what appeared to be insufficient individualized review. It did survive a motion to dismiss, and parts of this case are moving forward as we speak currently. Again, practical takeaway is to request patient-specific rationale and clarity on what evidence was considered and how, and to make them defend what they've alleged or what they've done, and make them defend their thinking. Next slide. So litigation takeaway for appeal writers from these cases. Use litigation context to justify specificity requests, not to argue liability. If you feel that AI has been involved, ask for the tool, process names, and version, and if relevant, just as you might ask for the name of the medical director who made the decision or the nurse reviewer who made that decision. You may not get an answer, but you do have a right to ask about it. Ask for the coverage criteria applied and the patient-specific factors considered to force them to look at the record and respond just on the record and avoid blanket denials. And then ask them to link the denial back to plan terms and standards. And then confirmation of the clinician review. Who was the name of the clinician that reviewed this and signed off on it? That way you've at least got a paper trail that you can use. If you want to go to the next slide, Eric. Applicability to other payers. As we talk about commercial payers, monitor proprietary AI denial tools and see if these comport with your contract terms. This is where your in-house legal may be of use. You may want to talk to managed care about whether your contracts allow your commercial payers to use AI algorithms in the denial process. If it's silent on that, they certainly can. You may want to talk about putting language in there to limit that use or to limit use to agreed upon cases. Medicaid generally is going to be specified at the state level. Beneficiaries are entitled to an individualized review, and you're entitled to request transparency on any outside algorithmic influences. Final takeaway, you really want to look for evidence-based decisions and try to protect equity and access to care for all patient populations. Next slide. So quality and integrity in AI-assisted appeals. As I said, benefits include consistent structure and clearer organization of the evidence. These appeals are inevitably quite complex because you're pulling from a medical record with about 15 or 20 different providers in it. You're trying to weave in evidence-based guidelines to support that. I found LLMs to be really, really good at providing that organization and context around the case as a guide, as a draft for me, as a guide. The dark side, as we talked about, unsupported statements can slip in all too often and may escape even the most seasoned professional. You can become overly confident on the output. Sometimes these things just seem way too perfect, and time again, you can't deliberately say that the LLM is lying, but when you start to look at the facts and the appeal that's been written, you're like, this is just too perfect. And you start to dig back in the record and you find out it got a little creative with some of the facts, and told essentially what it probably, and I hate to use this word, thought you wanted to hear. But if the letters are too perfect and you're like, this is the best appeal I've ever read, 100% chance this is going to get overturned. I guarantee if you start digging, you're going to find a little bit of fudging in there that needs to be corrected. Countermeasures, ways you can keep these things in control for now. Explicit sourcing. Show me the page number where you found this. Show me in the record. Show me an audit trail where you got this. Give me the URL to the article that you're citing this evidence-based guideline from. I remember last year, one or two of them were talking about the use trials for TAVRs, transcatheter aortic valve replacements. and provided 2 beautifully written articles with URLs. And when I clicked on the URL for the first one, it took me to a journal of veterinary medicine related to treating racehorses. So buyer beware. You really want to get into a habit of making the LLM or whatever you're considering using show its work. You know, just like we had to do in high school with geometry, you have to show all of your work to get credit for the final answer. Nothing's changed. If it can't show you each step of the way and it gives you a perfect answer, I wouldn't give it credit for anything. Go ahead to the next slide and we'll talk about where this is going over the next year in skills and roles. What I think this is allowing us to do is hospitals and other systems start to integrate and embrace AI, is to free UR nurses, physician advisors up to spend more time thinking and less on cutting and pasting and clerical assembly of documents. You know, having something that can pre-draft and organize a denial to a complex case is invaluable and allows you to spend time researching it, thinking through it, and freeing up from some of the grunt work. Key skills include the ability to look at source appraisals, you know, to say, does that evidence-based guideline that it's serving up actually say what it did say? And to make sure that the output is clear and concise and relevant. Things as people are working in norms is really to share your discoveries, shared checklists using consistent terminology and transparent edits. So if people are making edits to prompts, those should be shared across the team so that the team can evaluate the impact of any change to a prompt on the effect of the LLM. Emerging technology that we see coming down the road, generative AI, and this is a little bit off, for automated appeal drafting. Predictive analytics for denial prevention is in place now, where we can use AI to look at historical payer behavior, look at a current claim and the documentation in the record, and make a prediction based on historical insurer behavior plus the facts as they appear in the record as to whether that's going to be denied or not. Natural language process is better better able to extract free text from records. And RPA, robotic process automation, has been a huge time saver in accessing patient portals, payer portals, uploading documents, checking for statuses of payments, checking for payer responses. So we're getting into getting humans out of a lot of the grunt work and time consuming work that really wasn't a good use of human time, and freeing us up to doing what we do best, which is thinking, looking at things critically, looking at the record, looking for opportunities for improvement. You want to go over to the next slide? What I expect hospital leaders are going to start to monitor as people in the denial, audit, and appeal space or move forward and hospitals start to embrace these systems is the time needed to complete a reviewed appeal. You know, in year 2, 3 years ago, a lot of systems had in place an expectation that a reviewer would complete, say, 4 or 5 denials a day. That amount of work is in terms of cases expected to be reviewed is going to start to go up and increase as the amount of time it takes to complete that task goes down. So we're going to continue to see a focus on the cycle time to get a reviewed appeal complete and done and out the door. Who has to get engaged with this? How many fixes? How much staff time is involved in this? Are there more efficiencies to be bought through it? Are there changes in overturn rates by payer or by denial category? Are we all of a sudden, if we've transitioned from a 40 or 50% success rate with 2-day inpatient medical necessity stays that were denied by a Medicare Advantage plan, if that now drops to 20% after the implementation of an LLM, clearly there's a problem that needs to be tracked. So we need to keep track of those deltas. Deadline adherence, making sure that things are getting out on time, that nothing's falling through the cracks, which anytime you bring technology in, especially when you're bringing in multiple systems into a hospital, you run the risk of things falling through the cracks. And then I think finally, as we talked about earlier, to make sure that internal quality checks are adhered to and passed, that the committee, the work put forth by the committee in scoping out and allowing this to take place, and those best practices are adhered to on a daily basis. Next slide. So as a recap, AI accelerates drafting in organizations, and clinicians have to stay in this and make ultimate decisions as to what's being sent out is factual. I often, in talking with hospitals that want to rush in and throw an AI program into their denial department, say, we're just going to embrace this. There's a lot of danger in doing that. If you rush in open arms, say we're going to all of a sudden do all of our appeals through AI generation, because you're not going to know for 6 or 12 months whether you're doing better or worse. And you generally get one shot at these appeals. So if there's something fatal in the way that AI program works or was set up or interacts in your hospital, 6 or 12 months from now, you're going to have a huge drop in your revenue and your bottom line that you're not going to be able to go back and recover from. So while AI accelerates drafting, there is some potential downside that needs to be looked out for. Keeping clinicians in the loop is imperative to making sure that's not happening. Keeping input scoped, so making sure that you are feeding it agreed upon portions of the chart across the department, say just the medical records or history and physical or ER notes, for example, for a medical necessity appeal, and make sure that citations remain viable, and make sure that you can audit the processes. If you do start to have problems, understand where things went awry. This is why we have black boxes on airplanes to look at airplane crashes and figure out how do we improve airplanes and make them safer. The same process needs to apply as we move AI into the back end of the revenue cycle. Make sure you're working at a granular level, patient-specific logic and reasoning, not making generalized statements across a large population. So you want to make sure that the appeal addresses that patient's individual facts and circumstances, and only those things, and isn't making large sweeping generalizations and applying it back to that patient that may not be true. As I said, the final take-home message, if you take anything, is to operate within a governance framework, and coming back to it again with required human review. The last page is the footnotes for this, in case people want to do any additional reading. I will point to one really interesting article, which is the first one, the MIT article. And this came out late summer, about 2 months ago. And what they found out, and this is really telling for all of us on here who are clinicians, in a large scale experiment, and please pull this paper and read through it, found that 50% of the performance gains in an LLM model actually came from prompt improvements, not just developing newer, better technology. So the ability of a team to develop a prompt to do something drove over half the improvement in that LLM, not just updating it to the next greatest level of software. We're going to stop at that point. I'd like to stay on, but my spouse is having surgery in 10 minutes. And if I'm not there in the OR door, there's going to be a divorce. So if there are questions or comments, send them in. We'll get them posted on Adam. If I don't get there in 10 minutes, I may be back on Adam asking for a divorce attorney. Thanks everybody for your time today and attention. I am so excited about the era that we're in right now. For so long, we spend so much time, reading through charts, trying to make sense of things, piece things together, and it's been really brain-breaking work. the ability of AI to offload some of that and allow people to think and really work efficiently and intelligently is going to be a game changer for us. It's important, though, that AI remains working for humans, that we don't end up working for it. I do feel sometimes the time that I am interacting with Chat and Claude and Grok and some of these other AIs, and I'm correcting it and giving it feedback, that the future's already been cast, because I am making it smarter, I am correcting it, I am telling it what it's doing wrong, and it's understanding that, give it a human emotion. But like it or not, it's here, and I think as a skill set, it's imperative that we have a good understanding of this. So we'll post things online, and welcome any questions that folks might have. With that, I'm going to excuse myself and head down the hall here. So thanks, Eric. I'm going to leave you to and Anna, if Anna made it back. I think she was having some technical difficulties. That we've had some. Every time we talk about AI, the internet goes wonky, and I have my suspicions.
Yeah, it may be telling. You're right. You're right.
Carla, who normally hosts this, her internet just went down for 24 hours, and I wonder if Starlink or something got Anna too. So I'm surprised I haven't been targeted by something yet. So we'll see.
Well, thank you, Dr. Smith. Appreciate.
Perfect.
You can run, and we have had a few questions come in. So as Dr. Smith mentioned, we will get answers to them and send them out to all the attendees today. But thank you, everybody, for spending some time with us today, and we look forward to catching up with you next time. We did want to mention very quickly, we will be doing our next webinar, I believe not till the new year. So we'll usually take some time off during the holiday seasons, and we'll catch back up with you in January. All right, thank you all again very much. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you next time.